What's up guys, and welcome back to another Pokemon Switch video talking about possible games, themes, features on the upcoming Pokemon Switch game, because we know it's coming, we just don't know when or how or where or anything like that. So today we are going to be talking about the topic of Kanto Remake, which was what I asked you guys last episode to think about, which is, could we revisit the Kanto region on the Switch? When I say revisit, I don't mean like remake Red Blue. There are a few different ways it could happen. Of course, this is something we're going to be looking into now. So what options are there? As I mentioned, you could have a remake, okay? We had Red and Blue, and obviously Green, and then you had the remakes, Fire Red and Leaf Green in, I think it was like 2004 or something like that, I think. So could we get another remake again on the Switch? Kanto is the original region. If you talk about Pokemon, basically everyone knows Kanto, unless you've only played like the recent game or two. So everyone knows Kanto, so if you say like there's a Kanto game or a Kanto remake, everyone's going to, and straight away be like, their attention is going to be heightened towards that, and that was obviously a good bit of promotion there straight away. Other options though, you could visit Kanto as a post-game region. Again, that would heighten some interest of people. If you have a new Pokemon game, okay, new region, new Pokemon, boom, post-game Kanto, visit Kanto region, boom, everyone will be a bit more attentive to what was going on with that game, I think. So that's the other option. You could have very similar to a Heart Gold or Soul situation, where the post-game takes place in Kanto with some different areas and such. Or the final one, which is very similar to a remake, is a reboot. So rather than a remake, which is just take the original game, bring it up to modern standards, give it a few sort of facelifts and changes here and there, but basically for all intents and purposes it's the same game, it follows the same format. A reboot could shake things up a lot more. So rather than just Red and Blue and having the same sort of path through the region, exactly the same story things happening, you could have a reboot which might mix the story up a bit more to make it a bit more interesting. You could mix up the region, add some new areas, some old areas and stuff like that, so be a bit more than just a remake, which of course might be useful for Kanto at this point since it was the original region and lacks a lot of the stuff we do have rather nowadays. So we're going to look at each of these options, discuss how it would work. Would it be useful? Would we want it? How would it work in the context of a Pokemon Switch game? And also talk about at the end, talking about, is it likely we see Kanto again? To preface, probably not. Please don't be angry with me. But we'll talk about that later on. So first up, a possible remake. So how would a remake of the original Red and Blue or Fire Red Leaf Green work for a Switch game? Well, both of these games are pretty ancient at this point. Of course, Red and Blue were the originals. Fire Red Leaf Green, as I mentioned, I think they came out in like 2004. It's been like, 14 years since the games were actually released. So there'd have to be a lot of changes. You'd have to have some good changes, definitely online features. You'd have to have definitely graphical changes as well, that goes without saying. You have a lot more Pokemon now. Since Fire Red Leaf Green came out, you've got Generation 4, 5, 6 and 7. So you'd have to think about some ways of working some more Pokemon into the games. Of course, you had the Severe Isles from Fire Red Leaf Green. Maybe you either change them out for something else, or you rehash them, update them to make them larger to account for those extra Pokemon, and obviously update it in some other ways, because Fire Red Leaf Green had its downside, so we could definitely improve upon it like that. But is it really that likely that we get another remake of the original games? Well, possibly. It could be done in two ways. The first way being sort of just bring it up to the Switch, which is very simple graphics, very, keep it bare bones. Okay, maybe not simple graphics, give it a graphical update, but don't change anything apart from the graphics. Thus, the games are pretty much, boom, graphical update, it's 3D and everything, but that's it. There's, Generation 3 Pokemon, maybe just keep it to the original 151, just, say like this is a sort of offshoot of the main series. It's a main series game, but it's not integrated as well or as much as the others. You can just have 151 Pokemon in it, and that would help it be a bit more contained, and you could get away with it, I suppose you could say, because they would market it as a Kanto remake, revisit the original Kanto region in full 3D, and that would definitely pick up some traction, despite not being a fully fledged Pokemon game. And it could also be filling in a spot between. So we have the actual Generation 8 games. We have these, and then the Red and Blue remake comes in like in the middle, and then we have the Diamond Pearl remakes to sort of split it up a bit, so you can have two different teams working on these games, for example. That's one idea there. But as I mentioned, there's reasons why it wouldn't happen. So of course we have a remake schedule already. We had Heart Gold Soul Silver, then we had Oras, and now of course we're expecting Diamond Pearl remakes after Generation 8 gets going on the Switch, and then of course, well, maybe something more after that. Next will be Unova, probably not for a long while, another 5 years at least, but that might be on a Switch still, or a Switch successor, or something like that. So it's not in the remake schedule really. We've got other stuff to be planning on, but thinking about the remake schedule itself, okay, cool. So if we follow along, it's going to happen to the end of the time. Okay, cool. You remake Oras, Diamond Pearl remakes, cool. Black and White remakes. Do you have Black 2, White 2 remakes? Probably not. Then of course, oh, XY remakes, why not? And then, oh, Sun and Moon remakes, okay, cool. And then Generation 8 remakes. And when does Kanto ever get another remake, or Johto or Hone get another remake in the future? Of course, we don't need them right now, especially not for Hone, but how do you update the remake schedule to work with that? Do you have, as mentioned, offshoots of the original games? So rather than just, you know, another Oras, you give it an offshoot of a Hone remake that is full of 3D, full of stuff like that, but it's very simple and bare bones as an offshoot to the main series. Another idea I'm throwing out there, but probably not going to happen as a remake, because we have just had too much Kanto really. Too much Kanto is a big problem in the Pokemon franchise anyway, and it's been building up for the last few years, and it's something we'll talk about later on too. So for the moment we'll move on to visiting it as a post-game region. So this is something we had in Heart Gold Soul Silver, and of course the original Soul and Silver, Gold and Silver, and it's something they could definitely do again. A lot of people were thinking, like for Sun and Moon or Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, a post-game of Kanto could be a possibility. It wasn't, we had different post-game, but again, it could always be a possibility if they added in a second region. Kanto is a big, you know, sort of, unless you're making 2 new regions, Kanto is the first thing that comes to mind when you think about a post-game region. You don't want to randomly have your character visit, I don't know, Johto. Oh, we're going to Johto. Just going to Johto, not any particular reason. Yeah, it'd be like, visit the Johto region. Okay, that's cool, I guess, but it's not going to make headlines. Whereas if you're visiting the original Kanto region, it's a bit of a different mix-up there. So it gives you an opportunity to revisit the region, also revitalise it, because the way it could work out, of course, in Gold and Silver and obviously the remakes, you were like 2-3 years after the original events of, you know, Red and Blue, which meant certain areas of the region had a facelift. You had different like styles of areas. Of course, it was different graphics as well, especially for Heart Gold Soul Silver, but you had different region areas mixed up. Viridian Forest wasn't much of a forest anymore. You had, you know, certain areas blocked off, new areas added in some cases, but not too much. But it would give you an option to, again, revitalise it. So it could be another 5 years after Gold and Silver. It could be like the same sort of time as Sun and Moon or X and Y, and you could have different sort of whole new areas, and you could have, you know, maybe Cerulean City is just gone, maybe it was flooded, for example, and you have a whole new town on top of a mountain. You could expand it out, you could change the map around, because the map is, for Kanto, fairly empty. There's not too much, it's a fairly standard thing originally, but yeah, you could remove a town, you could add a new town somewhere, explore the mountains of Kanto or something like that to really mix it up a bit and give you some sort of, you know, extras, rather than just revisiting Kanto again and saying, yep, I know this route, I know that town, I know this route. You could have some newness to it, which wouldn't be a huge jump, of course. And also you could loop Team Rocket in. We had that sort of similarly in Heart Gold Soul Silver. They were the main villains anyway, but you could loop in and, you know, you turn up to the region, and Team Rocket is maybe not a full plan, but maybe some contingent of Team Rocket is still working. Or you could even build in Rainbow Rocket. I'll be doing a whole other video on that in the future, how they could bring it into other videos in the future generations, but it could definitely be a part of any game, but obviously it might work having Giovanni, I don't know which one it is, Giovanni I think, having him return to Kanto, except it's not his Kanto, and so he tries to take it over. You could have that as some sort of post-game plot. I feel that would work pretty well. But again, is it likely as a post-game region? I say it's definitely more likely than a full remake or a reboot, because it can be slotted in next to a new generation, so you don't have to have a whole game being Kanto again, but it can be a new generation, and then they can definitely promote it as, boom, Kanto's there, buy this game. And that's how it would be worded, I imagine, exactly the same as that. But, of course, the last option is a full reboot. Now, this is slightly different to a remake, as I mentioned, because it's the option to fully shake it up a bit and change some things. Because we have to remember, we haven't had a Kanto game, we haven't seen Kanto since Mega Evolutions were introduced. Now, the only thing we did get was a taster in Origins. We had, of course, I think Mr. Fuji give Red his Mega Stone and Keystone, which was the first link into Kanto and Mega Evolution. And it's just a question of, are we ever going to see it in a game? Are we going to get to play as that version of Red, where he gets to go and battle Mewtwo, who is, you know, obviously where it was originally, but can maybe Mega Evolve with his own Mega Charizard or Mega Venusaur or Mega Blastoise. Because you can have a reboot of the original games, but also mixing in Mega Evolution, maybe Z moves if they carry on across the franchise. And also you can add new story events, similar to a remake. We're shaking it up, new story events, new areas. You could even filter in some new characters. Of course, you have Red and Blue originally, but you could have maybe actually have Leaf here. Maybe have Leaf as a secondary rival who's more tuned to doing the Pokédex, or obviously Red if you're playing as a female. Yeah, different things you could mix up here. Of course, you've got Professor Oak. Maybe have Samsonite make an appearance before he jets off to Alola. Maybe meet Professor Kukui, who's in the region battling the gym leaders, as we find out he was doing in Sun and Moon. So you could really reboot some stuff, because of course we see Red and Blue at the Battle Tree in Sun and Moon and Ultra Sun and the Moon, but we've never seen that Red and that Blue before, because we never had a game from that universe. So I feel like it's an inevitability at some point we see a game from that universe in Kanto, to possibly shake it up a bit. Of course, you keep the main thread to the story. Team Rocket's still there. They still take over Silphco. Maybe their aims are slightly different though. Maybe some stuff shakes around there. Who knows exactly? But it would be really cool to see a whole reboot. So imagine Oras, which gave you like 1 or 2 new events. So you had Latias and Latios, which was obviously not in the original games, but you could mix them into the original Red and Blue, of course. You have the legendary birds, but they're just around there in the original games. You don't have any interaction with them. It could be better in some cases. Some people prefer that, but you could build in some sort of plotline around that. Saviars could be built on and have a new area. You could go to the Orange Islands, for God's sake. That would be pretty cool as well. Just some ideas there. So before we talk about whether or not the games are likely, any of these sort of versions are likely, how likely, let's talk about one thing before that, and that is references. Okay, so a lot of people, when talking about Kanto, will always say, oh, there were loads of references to it in Sun and Moon, or in Generation 7, or Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, or there were loads of references to it here and there. I think we're getting Kanto again. There are always lots of references to Kanto, let's be real. So obviously straight away we have, as I mentioned, Red and Blue at the Battle Tree. That's fair enough. We have Gladion and Lily both go to Kanto after the respective games. Oh, maybe we're going to Kanto to meet Gladion. That would be pretty cool. Yeah, but we forget, or you forget, or I don't forget, whatever. Kalos was basically a whole homage to Kanto itself. You got the Kanto starters. Each of those got a Mega Evolution. Mewtwo was in a cave named exactly the same as the original Mewtwo cave, with a guy saying exactly the same thing as the guy who stood in front of the original Mewtwo cave said. Mewtwo evolutions, of Mega Evolutions of course. Santaloon Forest had exactly the same layout to Viridian Forest and was basically at the same point in the game. Snorlax is sleeping on a road, you have to wake him up with a Pokeflute. All of the Alolan forms in Alola are Kanto Pokemon. There are lots and lots of Kanto references. Kanto sort of links in. I've already mentioned Kukui going to Kanto. There's always something in a Pokemon game referencing to Kanto because it's the original games. It makes sense. Of course, Kanto pandering is one thing which happened a lot. Lots of Kanto Mega Evolutions. As I mentioned, all the Alolan forms are Kanto, which people hate. I particularly hate, just terrible. There's too much Kanto. So in terms of references and people saying, oh, we heard about Kanto here, Gladion went to Kanto. Maybe we could have a Kanto games because it's been referenced there. No, just generally no. Every single generation has referenced Kanto somehow, some more than others. Of course, Kalos, as I mentioned, had so much Kanto referencing there. We didn't get a Kanto remake in Generation 7. We didn't get a Kanto remake in Generation 6 or whatever. Yeah, it doesn't link in really. So that's that, okay? They don't indicate a revisit or anything like that. So how likely are we to get them? As I mentioned, references don't count here. We're just talking about generally the games. How would it look from a professional standpoint and a business standpoint? Would it make sense? Well, of course, it won't happen as a first entry in Generation 8. It's very unlikely that's going to happen because Generation starts are always a new region, so they can say, buy a Switch, whole new region, all of these new Pokemon, please come and experience this with us, as opposed to saying, buy a Switch, you can play the same game you played, but for more money. Yeah, brilliant. Why not? Probably not going to happen, okay? Of course, it could be another part of Generation 8. We are expecting Downpour remakes though, but there's nothing to say they might not mix the schedule up a bit because they've done that in the past. So they could always just bring in a Kanto remake or a Kanto revisit at some point anyway and say, booyah, enjoy, but probably not. As I mentioned, it could be like a side offshoot as like a rather than a main series game. It's main series, but it's a side offshoot, so maybe the original game is remade but only 151 Pokemon. Another thing I've got written down here is possibly it could be a differently styled Pokemon, so they could try something new but with a Kanto remake or a reboot, and if it doesn't go down well, they can say that was a side game, we're going to stick with what we got. And that could be how they do it there, because if you say it's a Kanto game, it's going to draw in some attention anyway, and you may then, you know, even if it's a flop in terms of like it's not the best thing, people don't like it as much, it's still been bought because it's a Kanto game. So that's one way they could go from there. But those are just a few things, a few ideas I've got. Remake, post-game, reboot. Post-game is probably most likely, then it's probably a reboot to be honest in my eyes, because you need to reboot it for Mega Evolutions if they decide to focus on them at all anymore, and then the remake is the final one, possibly being an offshoot if it happens. But we didn't talk about the next video before we finish, because it's a very interesting one in my opinion. The topic is National Dex. So what does the lack of a National Dex in Generation 7 mean for future games? So in Sun and Moon and Ultra Sun and Moon there's no National Dex at all. Nothing, it's just a Lowland Dex. If you get a Pokemon that's in the National Dex but not in the Lowland Dex, it just doesn't have a number. So what does that actually mean? Because there are a few different things. Of course it's annoying for some people dislike it, so let me know what you think about that originally. Are you happy the National Dex is gone? You're more happy to sort of focus on owning the Pokemon that are available in your game, the game you have, i.e. Sun, Moon, Ultra Sun, Ultra Moon, or are you missing the National Dex and want to be able to record every single Pokemon in every single game? Let me know your thoughts on that down below in the comment section, because I'll be talking about it in the next video. But for now, this will be it for today, so I shall see you next time. Thank you for watching. Goodbye, my friends.